The morning sun had barely risen when Max, a curious golden retriever puppy with floppy ears and bright brown eyes, suddenly stopped chasing butterflies in his backyard. His ears perked up and his nose twitched. Something was different about this peaceful Sunday morning. A strange sound carried by the gentle breeze caught his attention. It wasn't like the usual chirping of birds or rustling of leaves he was used to hearing. Max lived with Sarah, a kind-hearted forest ranger, in a cozy cabin at the edge of Pine Grove Forest. At just 8 months old, he was still learning to be a proper ranger's companion, though he often got distracted by squirrels and his own tail. But today was different. That unusual sound made his heart beat faster, and for the first time in his young life, Max felt like he had an important mission. Without warning, Max squeezed through the loose board in the backyard fence, something Sarah hadn't fixed yet. His paws carried him deeper into the forest, following that mysterious sound. The morning dew soaked his fluffy golden fur as he pushed through tall grass and ducked under low branches. The sound was getting clearer now. It was unlike anything Max had ever heard before. Sarah, who had been preparing for her morning patrol, looked out the kitchen window just in time to see Max's tail disappearing into the woods. "Max!" she called out, but the puppy was already too far to hear her. This was strange. Max had never run away before. He always came when Sarah called, eager for belly rubs and treats. Something must be wrong. Deeper in the forest, Max's nose led him through a path few humans ever used. The strange sound was getting louder, and it made his heart race even faster. It sounded sad and scared, like someone crying for help. As he pushed through a thick bush of wild berries, Max finally found what his heart had been pulling him toward. There, nestled between the roots of an ancient oak tree wrapped in a thin pink blanket, was a tiny baby. The infant's face was red from crying, its little hands reaching up toward the canopy of leaves above. Max's puppy brain might not have understood exactly what a baby was, but his heart knew this tiny human needed help. The puppy's training kicked in. Sarah had been teaching him to bark 3 times whenever he found something important during their practice searches in the forest. Max let out 3 sharp, clear barks, then 3 more, and kept going. He stayed right next to the baby, his fur helping to keep the tiny human warm, while continuing to bark his special signal. Back at the cabin, Sarah had already grabbed her ranger gear and emergency kit. She knew Max wasn't just chasing squirrels this time. Something in her gut told her this was serious. As she jogged into the forest following Max's distant barking, questions raced through her mind. Why was Max acting so strange? What had he found? Why wouldn't he stop barking? The barking grew louder as Sarah pushed through the morning fog. She could hear the desperation in Max's voice, something she'd never heard before from her playful puppy. Her heart pounded as she followed the sound, knowing that whatever waited ahead would change everything. As Sarah got closer, another sound mixed with Max's barking, a sound that made her blood run cold. It was the cry of a baby, alone in the wilderness. How did it get there? Who would leave a baby in the forest? And most importantly, was she already too late? These questions hung in the crisp morning air as Sarah raced toward the sound of her puppy's urgent barks, unaware that she was about to stumble upon a mystery that would shake their quiet forest community to its core. Max had found something extraordinary, but this was just the beginning of a story that would test their courage, challenge their faith in humanity, and reveal the true meaning of being a hero. Sarah burst through the berry bushes, her ranger uniform catching on thorns as she followed Max's urgent barking. The sight before her made her freeze mid-step. Her young puppy was curled protectively around a tiny baby, his golden fur providing warmth against the morning chill. The infant, who couldn't have been more than a few weeks old, was whimpering softly. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, quickly kneeling beside them. Her trained ranger hands gently checked the baby, cold but breathing steadily. Max looked up at her with knowing eyes, as if to say, "I did good, didn't I?" Sarah's heart swelled with pride even as her mind raced with worry. She pulled out her radio, calling in the emergency with shaking hands. As they waited for help, Sarah thought back to the day she'd first met Max, just 6 months ago. She'd been working as a forest ranger for 5 years, but the job had started feeling lonely. The forest was her home, but sometimes the silence grew too heavy, especially after losing her father, a fellow ranger, to a heart attack last year. That's when Dr. Monica Chin, and the local veterinarian and Sarah's best friend, had shown up at her cabin one rainy evening. "I have someone you need to meet," Monica had said, opening her coat to reveal a trembling golden retriever puppy. The tiny dog had been found abandoned, near the highway, and something in his scared but trusting eyes reminded Sarah of herself when she'd first started her ranger training. "He needs someone who understands what it's like to find your courage," Monica had said softly, "just like your dad did for you." Now watching Max guard the abandoned baby with such dedication, Sarah realized how much he'd grown from that scared puppy. They'd trained together every day, search and rescue exercises, forest navigation, and basic commands. Max had shown an incredible aptitude for tracking, but more importantly, he'd helped heal the hole in Sarah's heart left by her father's passing. The sound of approaching sirens pulled Sarah back to the present. Soon, the quiet forest was buzzing with activity. Police officers, paramedics, and Sarah's fellow ranger, Tom Martinez, converged on the scene. The baby was quickly wrapped in warm blankets and checked by medical professionals. "The baby girl appears to be healthy," announced Sandra Williams, the lead paramedic. "Probably not more than 2 or 3 weeks old. If your dog hadn't found her when he did." She left the sentence unfinished, but everyone understood. Max had saved a life today. Detective Lisa Morgan, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, approached Sarah while officers searched the surrounding area. "We need to find out who abandoned this baby," she said grimly. "This is a criminal investigation now. Tell me everything you and your dog discovered." As Sarah recounted the morning's events, another figure emerged from the crowd. James Cooper, a local news reporter known for his sensationalist stories. His arrival made Sarah uneasy. She'd had run-ins with him before when he'd written exaggerated articles about forest incidents. "Ranger Harrison," Cooper called out, pushing past the police tape. "Is it true your dog found the abandoned baby? Was it a planned abandonment? Any signs of foul play?" His rapid-fire questions felt like attacks, and Max growled softly beside Sarah. "This is an active investigation," Detective Morgan intercepted firmly. "All questions can be directed to the police department's press office." But Cooper wasn't done. "Sources tell me there's been suspicious activity in these woods lately. Could this be connected to the recent reports of mysterious lights and strange noises at night?" Sarah's head snapped up. She hadn't told anyone, but she and Max had noticed unusual things during their evening patrols lately. Flashlights in the distance, sounds of vehicles well after the park's closing hours. She'd assumed it was just teenagers hanging out, but now, Detective Morgan must have noticed her reaction. After shooing Cooper away, she pulled Sarah aside. "Is there something you're not telling me?" Sarah hesitated, stroking Max's head for comfort. Should she mention the strange activities she'd observed? Before she could decide, Monica arrived at the scene, having heard the news through the local emergency network. "Sarah, is everyone okay?" Monica rushed over, medical bag in hand. She quickly checked Max for any signs of distress, then hugged Sarah tightly. "I knew that puppy was special the moment I found him." As the baby was carefully loaded into an ambulance, Sarah felt torn. Her ranger instincts told her there was more to this story. The abandoned baby, the mysterious nighttime activities, Cooper's probing questions. Max seemed to sense her unease, pressing closer to her side. Detective Morgan approached again, her expression serious. "We'll need your help with this investigation, Ranger Harrison. You and Max know these woods better than anyone. If there's criminal activity happening here, it might be connected to this baby. Are you willing to help us?" Sarah looked down at Max, who sat alert and ready beside her. She thought of her father, who had always taught her that being a ranger meant being a guardian of both the forest and its people. The abandoned baby could have died if not for Max's incredible instincts. What if there were more secrets hiding in her beloved forest? "We'll help," Sarah said firmly, scratching behind Max's ears. "Whatever it takes." "Good," Morgan nodded. "Because I have a feeling this is just the beginning. Someone chose these woods for a reason, and we need to find out why." As the emergency vehicles began to leave, Sarah noticed Max staring intently into the deeper forest. His ears perked forward. She'd learned to trust his instincts, and right now, those instincts were trying to tell her something. The mystery of the abandoned baby was somehow connected to the strange activities in her forest, and Max seemed to know it. Monica squeezed Sarah's shoulder. "You know you can count on me if you need anything." Detective Morgan approached again, her expression serious. "We'll need your help with this investigation, Ranger Harrison. You and Max know these woods better than anyone. If there's criminal activity happening here, it might be connected to this baby. Are you willing to help us?" Sarah looked down at Max, who sat alert and ready beside her. She thought of her father, who had always taught her that being a ranger meant being a guardian of both the forest and its people. The abandoned baby could have died if not for Max's incredible instincts. What if there were more secrets hiding in her beloved forest? "We'll help," Sarah said firmly, scratching behind Max's ears. "Whatever it takes." "Good," Morgan nodded. "Because I have a feeling this is just the beginning. Someone chose these woods for a reason, and we need to find out why." As the emergency vehicles began to leave, Sarah noticed Max staring intently into the deeper forest. His ears perked forward. She'd learned to trust his instincts, and right now those instincts were trying to tell her something. The mystery of the abandoned baby was somehow connected to the strange activities in her forest, and Max seemed to know it. Monica squeezed Sarah's shoulder. "You know you can count on me if you need anything, both of you." She gave Max a gentle pat. "Just be careful, okay? I've seen some strange people around town lately." Sarah nodded, her mind already forming a plan. She and Max would need to start doing night patrols more regularly. Someone was using her forest for something illegal, and they'd left an innocent baby to die. With Max by her side, she was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. The next day, Sarah met with Detective Morgan at the hospital after visiting Hope. "I think my father was investigating these people before he died," she said, showing Morgan the notebook. "His heart attack, what if it wasn't natural?" Morgan's expression darkened. "We'll look into it, but Sarah, if your father was onto something, these people might have been watching you even before you found Hope. The question is, why didn't they stop Max that morning?" The answer came in an unexpected way. That afternoon, while Sarah was reviewing forest maps in her cabin, Max started barking frantically at the front door. She opened it to find James Cooper, the reporter, looking nervous and disheveled. "I know I've been a pain," he said quickly, "but you need to hear this. I've been investigating disappearances along the eastern seaboard. Young mothers, babies, there's a pattern. The woods where Hope was found. It's not the first time. These people, they're using remote forests as transfer points." Before he could say more, gunshots rang out. Cooper fell forward, blood spreading across his chest. Max's training kicked in. He grabbed Cooper's jacket and pulled him inside while Sarah slammed and locked the door, bullets splintering the wood around them. Sarah dragged Cooper behind her father's heavy desk while Max stood guard at the window, his growl deeper than Sarah had ever heard it. She pressed her ranger jacket against Cooper's wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Phone. Evidence," Cooper gasped, pressing a USB drive into her hand. "Everything's there. Your father, he knew." His eyes closed as police sirens wailed, in the distance summoned by the gunshots. The next hours were chaos. Cooper was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Police swarmed the forest but found no trace of the shooters. Detective Morgan placed Sarah and Max under protective custody, but allowed them to stay in the cabin with 24-hour police presence. That night, after the police had finally given them some space, Sarah sat on her father's old porch swing, with Max's head in her lap. The USB drive felt heavy in her pocket. Whatever was on it had nearly got Cooper killed, and might have gotten her father killed too. "What do you think, buddy?" she whispered to Max. "Should we look?" Max's brown eyes met hers, full of trust and determination. He'd followed his instincts to save Hope, just as her father had followed his instincts about these criminals. Now it was Sarah's turn to be brave. As she booted up her laptop, Sarah remembered something her father used to say: "The forest protects its own." Maybe that's why Max had been able to reach Hope that morning. The criminals hadn't expected a puppy to be their undoing. They'd been watching Sarah, but they hadn't counted on Max's pure heart and unwavering courage. The USB drive contained a folder named Project Cradle. As Sarah began to read, Max's ears suddenly perked up. Through the window, far in the dark forest, a light began to flicker. The files on Cooper's USB drive revealed a horrifying truth. An international trafficking ring had been using remote forests as exchange points for kidnapped babies. Sarah's father had stumbled upon their operation before his heart attack, which according to Cooper's files had been caused by a virtually undetectable poison used by the traffickers. Sarah's hands trembled as she read, while Max continued watching the mysterious light in the forest. The trafficking ring, known as Project Cradle, had been operating for years. They targeted vulnerable new mothers, sometimes buying babies, sometimes taking them by force. Hope's case was different, though. She had been left behind during a botched exchange when local police had unknowingly patrolled too close to their meeting point. A sudden crash outside made Sarah jump. Max's bark turned into a low growl as shadows moved past the cabin windows. Detective Morgan had left 2 officers on guard, but Sarah couldn't hear them responding to the noise. Her phone buzzed. A text from Monica. "Sarah, Hope is missing from the hospital. Armed men took her." Before Sarah could respond, the cabin ductor burst open. 3 men in dark clothes rushed in, guns raised. Max leaped forward, placing himself between Sarah and the intruders, his protective growl echoing through the cabin. "Call off dog," ordered the tallest man in a thick Russian accent, "or we finish what we started with your father." Sarah's mind raced. These men had killed her father, tried to kill Cooper, and now they had Hope again. Her hand slowly moved toward the panic button Morgan had installed under her desk. "You press button, baby dies," the man said, holding up his phone to show a video feed. On it, Sarah could see Hope crying in what looked like a car seat. "You want to save her? You come with us." Bring dog too, he caused us much trouble. Sarah understood. They needed her to keep Max quiet. The puppy who'd ruined their operation was now their biggest threat, as his heightened senses could lead authorities to their locations. But they'd made a crucial mistake in bringing Hope back to these woods. Okay, Sarah said slowly, raising her hands. We'll come. Just don't hurt the baby. The men zip-tied her hands and attached a rope to Max's collar, leading them into the forest. Sarah's heart pounded, but she stayed calm, remembering her father's training. The forest protects its own. They walked for nearly an hour, going deeper into the woods than most people ever ventured. Finally, they reached an old ranger station that had been abandoned years ago. Inside, Sarah could hear Hope crying. A well-dressed woman stepped out, clearly the leader. The famous ranger and her miracle dog, she said coldly. Do you know how much money your puppy cost us? These woods were perfect for our operation, until you two started interfering. You killed my father, Sarah said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Arthur Harrison was a problem, the woman shrugged. Like father, like daughter. But don't worry, your deaths will look like a tragic accident, perhaps a bear attack. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Monica's SUV burst through the trees, headlights blazing, with Detective Morgan and a SWAT team right behind her. The traffickers opened fire as Sarah dove for cover. In the chaos, she saw one of the men running toward the ranger station, toward Hope. Max, find Hope! Sarah screamed, knowing her puppy could track the baby's scent. Max bolted after the man, squeezing through a broken window into the station. Inside, Max found the man trying to escape through a back door with Hope. Without hesitation, the puppy launched himself at the kidnapper, biting down on his arm. The man yelled and dropped the baby carrier, but it landed safely on a pile of old blankets. Outside, the gunfight continued. Sarah managed to break free of her zip ties using a sharp rock and rushed toward the station. Through the window, she saw Max standing guard over Hope's carrier, facing down the injured kidnapper who now had a gun pointed at them. Max, protect, Sarah commanded, the special command they'd trained for but never had to use. Max stood his ground, his body completely covering Hope, giving Sarah the seconds she needed to tackle the kidnapper from behind. They struggled for the gun. A shot rang out, hitting the ceiling. Max barked furiously but didn't leave his post, protecting Hope. Finally, Sarah got the upper hand, knocking the man unconscious with his own weapon just as Morgan and the SWAT team burst in. Sarah, Max, Monica rushed to check on them as the authorities secured the scene. Hope was crying but unharmed, Max still refusing to leave her side until Sarah gave the all-clear command. The trafficking ring's leader and her crew were arrested. In the old ranger station, authorities found detailed records of their operation, including proof they had murdered Sarah's father. The heart attack had been caused by a poison slipped into his coffee during a routine stop at a local diner. Hours later, as the sun began to rise, Sarah sat on the station's porch with Max in her lap, Hope sleeping peacefully nearby in Monica's arms. Detective Morgan approached with a tired smile. You know, Morgan said, your father would be incredibly proud, both of you. She knelt to scratch Max's ears. The doctors say Cooper will make it too. His evidence, combined with what we found, here tonight will put these monsters away for life. Sarah hugged Max tightly, feeling tears roll down her cheeks. Dad always said the forest protects its own, she whispered. I never really understood until now. It brought Max to me, and then Max brought us Hope, and together we finished what Dad started. Speaking of Hope, Monica said softly, her biological mother was found. She was one of their victims. They took Hope shortly after birth. They're being reunited tomorrow. Max's tail thumped against the wooden porch as he watched the first rays of sunlight filtering through the trees. He might not have understood everything that happened, but he knew he had done his job. He had protected his family, just as the forest had protected him when he was an abandoned puppy. Sarah looked out at her father's beloved woods, now slowly awakening to a new day. The forest had been cleansed of its darkest secrets, and somewhere, she felt sure her father was smiling. Thanks to a brave little puppy who followed his heart, justice had finally been served. Max barked softly, as if in agreement, and Sarah smiled. Some might call it luck that brought Max into her life just when she needed him most, but Sarah knew better. In the end, it wasn't just about a puppy finding a baby in the woods. It was about family, courage, and the unshakable bond between humans and animals who choose to protect each other. 2 months after the dramatic events at the ranger station, Sarah's cabin had become a very different place. The bullet holes in the door had been repaired, the police tape was long gone, and the morning sun streamed peacefully through new windows. On the wall hung a framed newspaper article with the headline, Heroic Puppy and Ranger Uncover International Crime Ring. Sarah sat on her father's old porch swing, sipping coffee and watching Max play in the yard. He'd grown so much in the past months, not just in size but in confidence. The local police department had officially certified him as a search and rescue dog, the youngest in the state's history. "You're thinking about Dad again, aren't you?" Monica asked, settling beside her on the swing. She'd taken to coming over for breakfast most mornings, claiming she was checking on them, but Sarah knew her friend just loved being part of their little family. "He would have loved Max," Sarah smiled, watching her puppy proudly carrying his new search and rescue bandana in his mouth. "Sometimes I wonder if he somehow led Max to me." A car approached up the gravel driveway, Detective Morgan's familiar police cruiser. But today, she wasn't alone. In the passenger seat sat Maria, Hope's mother, with little Hope bundled in her arms. Max's ears perked up immediately. He'd visited Hope in the hospital several times during her recovery, and the bond between them was something special. "Look who wanted to say goodbye before heading home," Morgan called out as they walked up to the porch. Maria's eyes were already brimming with tears. "I can never thank you enough," Maria said, hugging Sarah with her free arm. "Both of you." She knelt down so Hope could see Max, and the baby's face lit up with a toothless grin. Max gently licked her tiny hand, his tail wagging softly. The story of Hope's reunion with Maria had touched hearts across the country. She'd been one of many victims of the trafficking ring, but unlike most, she'd gotten her baby back, all thanks to a puppy's incredible instincts and a ranger's determination to uncover the truth. "We're moving to Arizona to be near my family," Maria explained, "but I wanted Hope to see Max one last time. She'll grow up knowing about her guardian angel." She pulled out her phone, showing Sarah a newly finished nursery. Above Hope's crib hung a beautiful painting of a golden retriever puppy with angel wings. As they chatted, Cooper pulled up in his wheelchair, pushed by his nurse. He was still recovering from his wounds, but had insisted on coming to say goodbye to Hope too. His expose on the trafficking ring had won him a Pulitzer nomination, though he claimed the real reward was seeing justice served. "You know," Cooper said, watching Max play peekaboo with Hope, "I was wrong about so many things before this. I thought journalism was about finding dirt, exposing scandals, but sometimes it's about sharing stories that remind us there's still good in the world." Sarah nodded, thinking of all the changes the past months had brought. The old ranger station had been renovated into a training center for search and rescue dogs. Monica had started a program bringing shelter dogs to visit sick children, inspired by Max's special bond with Hope. Even Detective Morgan had adopted a retired police dog. As the morning wore on, more visitors arrived. The nurses who had cared for Hope brought cookies. Local families whose missing persons cases had been solved thanks to the trafficking ring investigation came to express their gratitude. Sarah's fellow rangers dropped by with a surprise. They'd renamed the trail where Max had found Hope to Angel's Path, but the biggest surprise came when Maria handed Sarah an envelope. Inside was an official document naming Max as Hope's godfather. "I know it's unusual," Maria laughed, seeing Sarah's expression, "but nothing about this story has been usual. I want Hope to grow up knowing that family isn't just about blood. It's about love and protection and being there when someone needs you most." That evening, after all the visitors had gone, Sarah took Max for their usual patrol. The forest felt different now, not just safer, but more alive somehow. As they passed the spot where Max had found Hope, Sarah noticed something that made her catch her breath. Growing among the roots of the old oak tree was a circle of tiny white flowers that hadn't been there before. Dad used to call those angels. "Tears," she told Max, kneeling to touch the delicate petals. "They only bloom once every few years." Max nuzzled her hand, his brown eyes wise and loving. Back at the cabin, Sarah found one last surprise, a package from the state governor. Inside was a custom-made gold badge for Max, officially appointing him as an honorary forest protection officer. But Max seemed more interested in his favorite squeaky toy, reminding Sarah that despite all his heroics, he was still just a loving, playful puppy at heart. That night, Sarah added a final entry to her father's old notebook. "Dear Dad, you always said the forest protects its own. Now I understand that you weren't just talking about the trees and animals. You meant all of us who call this place home. Max taught me that heroes come in all sizes, and that the biggest hearts often beat in the smallest chests. You once told me that being a ranger wasn't just about protecting the forest, but about being part of its story. Thanks to a brave little puppy, our story has touched more lives than we could have imagined. I think maybe that's why Max came into my life just when I needed him most. The forest knew I was lost without you, so it sent me a guardian angel of my own. And together, we help the forest do what it does best, protect its own. Love always, Sarah." As she closed the notebook, Max jumped onto her lap, No longer the tiny, scared puppy she'd first met, but still her faithful protector. Through the window, the stars twinkled over their beloved forest, and somewhere in the distance, a mother sang her baby to sleep, with a story about a brave puppy who followed his heart and found a miracle. Sarah hugged Max close, knowing that their story was far from over. There would be more adventures, more lives to touch, more people to help. But for now, in this peaceful moment, she was content, knowing that sometimes the biggest miracles come with 4 paws and a wagging tail. Good boy, Max, she whispered. Good boy.